compulsory to its compulsion has a direct line length that platitudes and location of travel. Understanding that position is all instant calculations. So it's about living inside the eyes, guys. You get out of the factors of the high corner centers and direct lines of discord, reach out to the location, converting line position operation signals. You understand how to live inside the eyes through its construct of its own setting, its own inference structure. So this helps you to modify the position lines of travel. Now all this information is happening inside the eye of Alexa. Okay, working all together and converting, right? All inside the eye itself. Okay, all different angles, all different flux. Okay, that's your test on Friday. Okay. Converting lines actual projection itself, bringing in position of programming, directing lines and line course centers and positional levels, hieroglyphics, directing ground centers of sequence and location of its eye itself, and spectacles and travel communications. Now, as it moves really, really fast, you can't see what's going on for vision, right? Because it has flash charge mixed in time frame. See how it's changing by itself? It's operating its own system. Now, if I want to get control with this cycle, I have to convert the setting of angles, working with inside the simulation grounds. Okay, but as it moves, it's an optical illusion, right? Moving so fast in cent lines of calculation, right? All this is happening in your activities and mobilities inside your data feeds. Channel feeds, operation feeds, channel liner operation lines of grounds, how to use the location receive receptors through reception itself. There's a long case of setting the calculation. So we're going to convert that setting off through operation lines of grounds. Coming in position lines of setting, starting with face recognition, pattern recognition, all line connections, set foundation at ground centers. Process your position at ground centers of sequence, platitude operation lines, position of powers. Then you come into the atmospheres and highways. So we start off with snowy graph interference, and then we come to consolidarity. But you have to know exactly what it's like to be all black in a triangulation. Stay within the lines. It's just the basic grounds. And then we go on light shades and shadows. Okay. Runs its own operation setting, but it's consolidated to its own system, right? Now, understand the wire indicators. We go with black. We go through line connection setting and positions. Now we go with the net line centers. Now we go into red. Solidarity lines of red. Contrast, directing lights, light metaphors, and coloration lines of pattern duration of time frame, and light communication to its system, all three coloration lines of calculation grounds. Okay, all solidarity, right? Now if I bring this back to the failsafe, it's still there in traction, right? So we're good to go. You see that? It changed the color, just the angle, 1/3 foreground, different color, right? See? It's amazing how it travels on its own system. Coloration is line setting, knowing exactly how you come in that positions. Now, when you get in that positions, you can override the line signals. Two bridgings over lines of signal. Okay, there's the bridge. Travels points of the graph, circulation, rotation, and travel. Okay, converting positions. Now I'm going to go through 3 lines of patterns into the I-line sequence. The set calculations. Start with that position of pattern, process line positions. Now we go into the bedding outside line centers. Okay, this is outline centers in position of grounds of space. That's space itself. Okay, so I want to make that very well clear. Let's travel point lines of graph, directing line ground centers and sequence lines of pi in generation screen locations. Converting bedding, crossing angles and flux. Different angles, process of indication. Okay, you apply it to positions, you go through 3 lines of grounds, cent lines of travel, indication lines of calculation. It's all connected together. Process that position, change time frame, of course, in this calculation, you're going to cent lines. Outside signal. Okay, 3 grounds, 3 centers, 3 travels. 3 indication setting and bridging over all line centers and travel calculation. Convert the system all through operation. This is all through triangulation, coloration lines of void and positions of red. Okay, traveling its own system. Identifying its own code lines into its pyramid and travel. Okay, now we go through grid lines with platitude positions, because you have your ground centers, you have your center operation of clocking. Don't forget to understand that. Okay, This is your grounds and your platforms. It's very powerful when you start to recognize what you're doing in traction. That converts the setting lines of triangulation, all position lines that change the structure of design of the schematics of pi. Process that position here, 3 centers of angles, 4 centers of measure of 2 scales, set course, centers converges set in operation, top rotation vessel. Change time frame, change the platforms at EQ, and process lines of ceilings of rotation. Setting converting line ground centers. Now this is my bandwidth. Okay, I have in longitude, latitude. I'm just showing you how powerful it is. Okay, overlooking the sun or sun looking over the moon. That process set lines of travel. Now the platform process your system match projection yourself, bringing yourself in and void your set position of operation. Okay, now in that settings you have to bring your observation system. Now that's going to be processing your position astral projections. You're not going to see the body. The body's just going to be astral projection, which is going to be the onseer, onlooker, the on-watcher. Okay, it's going to be the voiceover. That's what's going to channel everything to your central drive, to your main drive, to your kick drive, to your high drive. So the process of the void itself, observing everything, okay, that it's seeing in operation of its game that it put itself into. The observer, the game. Pretty simple to understand it. So now it's outside. Everything's outside, seen from inside, real time. That's your Earth rotations at 12 lines of grounds or 24 lines of clocking through foundation. Converting lines, high signals, that process line positions. So you can stay with the game line or send another convergence system, another game center in direct lines of link and process calculation. Okay, if you change the ice line sequence, you have to change the astral project locations to another line of level. Okay, override signals, change the flux of time frame and set lines of 2 triangulation lines of flux. Process line, location, and rotation at travel, communication, and convergence. Directing ground centers line sequence, platitude locations, change the colors lines of projection to another observation. Okay, another observation system, overlooking everything outside, inside location, right? So as soon as you bring that in, you bring in another project, which is another game that you bring in. So you start with the blue, okay? Now it's outside line connection setting convergence, okay? That's what it is, direct line link. Brought it in, right? Okay, and then you can change the coloration of red, security put position lines of brain convergence setting to the DOS, IPA, iOS. Wire signatures, location sending calculation lines of travel. Okay? All right, so that means you're going to bring another one. It's another projection of a setting astral projection of itself. Okay, so you got 42 locations inside the simulation of projection. There's your sim. So that's a lot of activity that's happening inside the eye itself in spectrum of lights of communication. Right? So you can see it in all different 4 panels of operation. So every time you blink, your eyes blink, they process indicates lines of flux. They change the circulation, rotation, and galaxy alignments and process your colossus. So it's like you have to understand what your eyes are doing. As this process, everything line condition setting, 45 line angles at simulation graphs, solar panels. Okay. So in that position, you change time locks, change conversion timeline centers, and position of processing. Compass over grounds, high operation lines, eye signals. Process that, position lines, inside travel, outside measure, outside scale of communication. Right? Directing lines of path engines over line grounds, into high operation location setting. Okay? So, look what I created, consolidarity of a triangulation of void and a triangulation of security of red. Look at that. Look what I created inside the eye. Spectacles of the eye itself is the simulation itself that you live inside the system. Understand the interpretation vessels, travels point lines graph, and center operation setting attraction. Okay? So, this is coloration. You guys are coming in snoring graph interference. Okay? Face recognition. See? Face recognition. All right? There's the face. There's your symbiote. So you're always going to have foregrounds and position in setting a face facade, dreaming of the dream. Okay? Remember, the dream is the mind that's constantly creating different images, that never stops running the internal external force of your system that puts you in a conception of mind lines, adaptation of flux, that process your position how you see through immortality. What you have to identify is what you do in face facade. That's protecting, securing, and nurturing your system so nothing gets in projection how you see your data feeds, or your communication feeds, or directing lines feeds, or any location or prompter. Understand what your eyes are nothing but a receptor, a reception that you have to process and engage, inform, and shape through. Okay? Living inside the eyes itself is the astral projection of its system. Okay? And then it rotates on its own system. All right, so let's go through line centers. We got consolidate area over travel. Let's get into snowy ground interference. Pixelation grounds. So we'll go through 3 box frames. Okay, and triangulation of flux. Okay, this is my bandwidth through my eyes in sequence. Okay, so we're going to work with that. All right, so we've got lacing lines, the calculation snowy graph. Position of 2 wires, 3 wires, 4 centers, snowy graph in positions of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 platforms in position. Okay. Right? So that's that. Look, see, it's moving, right? See? Changing the station, changing the channels. Sound waves over travel. Converting line to rotations, high center location, setting position to Schumann resonance. Okay? Centers of operation, set calculation. Waving panels, electron line grids. That process in positions. Now, once you understand the snowy graph interference, then you can bring in the security about the system. Line signals, line travels. Outside line rotation, inside calculation, wire signatures. Pixelation grounds, non-line centers, and line position your system, outside traction. Okay? Working all together in line position, brain convergence, directing lines and modification grounds. Then you bring in the blue, which is the blue line centers, into protection. Void itself is the structure line. Okay, the security line is the protection line, and the blue line is the energy force line of protection location and setting. 3 wire signatures, then you can use your foundation grounds, then you can use your set position templates and tablets and turn your set position to period activation line grounds, communication setting, to its system through its operation. Pixelation lines to its film chip and design. Okay? But seeing this all work all together through set of operation. Right? So I'll bring in the green, okay, which is gamma. Now, it could be anything gamma, it could be anything signal. It doesn't have to be gamma. You understand what you bring in. It's all through your system. But the gamma's got to be outside. It tweaks the inside line rotation. So it's understand not just living inside the TV, but understand the TV itself, foundation, inside the eye setting. Okay, working within positions, all through operation. Change channel screens, all through T receptor. Okay. Rotation, spin, cycles, circulation. Inside, electrical line wires, and travel. You have to modify your system, understand how to go through electrical line wires and fusion location and travel. Okay, which is your highways. That's right, guys. Your electrical line wires are your highways itself that we modify through. Okay, and set calculations. Travels all together. Setting course line channels, directing lines, position of flux over travel calculations. Converting settings, all through operation. Creating the highways. 3 central lines, and titular rotation lines of 4 travel communication lines of graph. Okay, set positions, operation setting, fortitude, latitude, operation setting sequence. Okay, that's position your settings, face facade of operation, protecting, securing, and nurturing your system and projection. You always have to have your faces, because everything you're implicating through, you're going through your data feeds, your communication feeds, you're going through your channel feeds, you're going through your TV receptors of film strips. You try to understand how your eyes are nothing but receptors or reception. And understanding that is process and positions how you go into your settings, all the calculation grounds and set traction of locations. Okay, working with inside the simulation. The simulation. There it is, the simulation. All right, you can change the formations all through box frame. Okay, it's pretty amazing when you see it through an optical illusion. See? Optical illusion, eh? See, at different levels, different shapes. Now, if I spin it, okay, you see it change in all different angles, right? So I'm just showing you how it changed the spectrum of light of travel in your schematics of our travel calculations. Inside lines, outside travel communication. Okay, directing inside positions all through structure, all through travel. And again, every time you change an eye frequency line grounds, it changes the perception of time frames of your eye itself. Okay, so it doesn't matter how many times you change frame lines, it changes the travels of direction of your windows. Process here through pi, operation sequence, and calculation line grounds. Okay, windows, frames, sending lines of travel. 3 indicates lines of flux, bedding over 4 centers in direct lines into 45 angle lines of communication. Wall ground centers in sequence. Platitude operation in 144 flux, line condition location grid. Process and position lines of travel, inside line condition setting, in process and position lines of calculation. All right, inside line condition setting, and embedding and rotation lines of surface, in highways, outside, looking in, and set calculation. Right, so you're in position, bring your aspect projection yourself in. You always have to bring your aspect projection yourself, which is monitoring your system, which is the outer structure. So you are just the white observing everything outside from in, right? Okay, you can rotate your cycles, set positions, lines of travel. And you can go to different directions and set lines of calculations. Inside positions here, and jump over here in time frame, okay, of operation. So it's amazing how we convert the setting lines of travel and directions in the simulation grounds, okay? So it's incredible how we circulate and rotate our positions of our platforms into set calculation, okay? Inside, line can set it to the simulation. And then you can change the color again, add another program, monitoring your system, controlling that position. You can leave that cycle, leave that into transmission, process that position so it doesn't override you, creating another game, and set lines of travel. Okay, so you bring yourself into another line position. There's you and aspect projection inside the game. Another game you're monitoring. So every time you bring in a game, you're bringing in a different observation of your system. That's programming the system at angles of travel calculation and ground setting in sequence. Platforms, lines, directing ground settings, and lines of travel. But process your system is knowing what's going on with electrical line wires that process your in set position. So think of your brain, it's nothing but a road graph screen. Electrical line wires, electrical lines and panels. That process your neurological system, your pathological setting, your neuropathy, line condition setting, converting line position, satellites, modems, and towers of communications. Right? So starting with snowy graph interference of box, 3 centers of directions, just black and white, right? And then triangulation. So I'm just showing you landmass, okay? How to go through snowy graph interference, right? And circle. So you have to truly understand how to live in the eyes through circulation and position and coloration line calculation like metaphor. Snowy graph interference, working all together in travel, right? Working inside line conditions of the sim, okay? See how it rotates? And can change it at all different angles, right? Okay, but you can, if it goes really fast, you can see the platforms, right? So the platforms look like this, okay? It's very powerful stuff, how you see the platforms that travel. But you have to implicate the mass and volume through acceleration of time frame that processes the platforms itself in travel communications, okay? Now it's in central line, operation sequence, and platitude locations of snowy graph lines, line signal location system. All right, so it's all about understanding the waving line grounds, how to see it through TV receptor inside travel. Okay, converting line centers can come into consolidarity. Now you can change red line sequence into flux. Okay, which here's set lines of operation. Okay, your XD1000. See? Your line signals, that's what XD1000 floats on. The line signals of the electrical line grid that process the motivation system, which is the moderation line grounds into electrical lines of panels inside the eye itself. Okay, that's where the XD1000s, they go in their holographic grid lines that process their system interactions. So they can convert this way, but they have to go with the line signals. They can vortex and time leap and time jump, but they have to go lines and settings and grids. Okay, that locks their mechanism location of travel. Okay, which travels through the lacing lines of pixelation grounds. Now, once you get in 42 lights and high direct line grounds, so you can change the graph screen location, outside position. You have to create the outer structure, and then you bring your aspect projection in. If you don't, it overrides the inside line and affects the outside line projection, how you see lines that your data feeds, a process position T receptor. All right, so now it rotates its own system of travel, converting line position all platforms 12 below, 12 above, and position 24 clocking. Then you can bring your aspect projection of yourself, which is your set positions. Okay, you seeing the observer, everything outside seen in. Okay, so that's why you have to set up a center graph, right? to essentials to human residence graph locations. All right, so then you can bring your astral projection of yourself, okay, into programming, okay, from line signals, direct line center, in process of two, position of two voids in communication, converting with each other through telepathy, talking to each other through tango tango. All right. So remember, every single time you change the platforms, you've got to change your flux, okay, which is your flywheel. It rotates and circulates rotation lines of grounds in sequence, okay. So platitudes the angles of where the astral projection is going to go, okay, where the astral projections are going to go on different angles of processing. So you got 4 angles. And set position all calculated lines, observers watching everything of 4 programs all at once in travel. Okay? There's your Earth in rotation. There's the Earth, black and white. And red in sequence is the simulation grounds. They're the observer watching everything out, inside. Okay? Outside in, inside out. Now, once you understand the structure of your system, then you modify what's above and then you modify what's below through the eye line. Okay? That formulates the simulated lines of grounds. Now, this is all through the simulation, how you create it through an earth line rotation of just black and white. Okay, so once we get in that position, we cross-reference different angles of patterns, lacing lines of communication. And we go strip lines of anomaly of 45 lines of patterns and rotations. Different position lines, there's different truth of its false and its narrative. Okay, truth narrative, false narrative, which is just the perspective how we see in lines of mass. And then we process that position of light, shades, and shadows, coming at bandwidth over pi. Kind of position lines of time frame in pyramid optimization lines, center, core, center position, your commodities, and your inference strike location, your building and design. All right? Change the flux line, change the box frame, location, setting, converting lines, operation lines of sequence. Platitude operation lines, platitude rotations, eye sequence, eye patterns, eye travels, eye directions, in locations of calculation. Okay? So it's really interesting where you can go for that center, outside, inside line rotation to its Earth itself. It rotates everything at travel. Converting line ground centers has a 45 angle of travel communications, all through travel, all through calculation. Okay? There's the grounds, right? Separate the space line, time frame, box frame, correlation, triangulation frame. Set converting position of pi and generation lines and positions of platforms over a queue, over a screen, or location of travel. Directing ground centers and platforms that calculation ground centers set position all levels of panels, operation lines of sequence, and direction of time frame. Triangulation box locations and windows, line direct centers and ground lines of sequence and platform. Set operation lines of travel communication over the opposite line centers of space itself, convert the line position operation travel into the eye division location setting and spectrums over light. There it is. There's the structure, there's division, there's the location setting. To your earth line is stoic of interference. Process and position, now you bring yourself astral projection in because you put up a fence. Because you don't put a fence in, you get swept in through a VBAC, through a line position, all levels, that processes you into dark matter. You'd be sucked inside the eye lines that goes to the opposite locations, not the internet connection setting projection. So it's very important you put up the fencing, and then you bring your outside line so you can see it's in position, right? There has to be a fence there when you bring the observer in, okay? Through void or anything of that color, okay? It's very important you understand that. And also change your flux when you want to change your projection of your programs that you put yourself into. Outside looking in, okay? Now when it's outside, now it can create anything that it brings in. Okay, change the DOS to purple, okay, which is this line signal location of travel, so it's system location. All right, now it's there. Okay, there's your astral projection of you in the program of the game. Right there. Right there. Okay, working all together, all formation setting. Okay, but it's amazing how you see your earth in structure division and that formation setting in travel. So you're converting from below, seeing above. All right, 3 angles in process. Okay, but you always have to have an observer. But it's important you have to have a gate outside that protects everything inside. Because remember, if you don't put that gate up, you get sucked into a galaxy of alignment. So this is what happens if you don't set up a gate. The circulation offline centers puts you in a closest communication setting to a black hole. Black hole serves line condition setting. You go in convergent system to the earth line rotations into the matrix of travel. Okay, so you don't want to do that in set position. Change time frame, change course of timeline, change the eye sequence and platforms into pixelation grounds and set lines of operation settings of travel at convergence. Okay, so it's very powerful how we come in that position with the calculation. All right. But it's amazing how you go through the eye line division inside traction. Okay? Working all together in provision. All right. So just to get you guys to understand how to see lines of travel. Okay, how you go through the spectrum, how you go through the line centers. The eye itself has to be the upline rotation, ground lines the sequence, platitude location. This is your fortitude lights at a firmament location to ether and its core of travel. Okay, so starting here, this is your bandwidth. That's your bandwidth, right? Then you fortitude lights, outside signal, inside rotations, like this in tractions. Converting lines, operation centers. There's your film strip in design that you're going through. Okay, 2 centers of calculated lines, 4 lines of windows of travel. Okay, converting lines at ground centers in position at all levels. Swinging up, swinging down, center operation to set lines of travel. There's your bridging. Bridging rotations, ground centers and flux over grounds. Okay, that process your position location lines of clouds, operation line center in sequence, which is the I division of center operation. Of course, centers of 2 travels, directly in position of flux, in position of DOS. Okay, cloud conversion settings, I line set position and identities, process that position all calculation lines of travel into your brain conversion system. Your DOS comes electrical line, grade line location is a customization system and configuration. Okay, process in that position, you're in the center line. This is where you come into full configuration of void itself, inside calculations, right? Which is your astral projection. Okay, that's how it works. Inside the eye line, inside position of operation. Okay, travels all together, sent lines of operation sequence, platform settings, and travel calculation. Okay, then your position here, there's your wings, traveling settings. Okay, process position of center lines, percentage over screen, adaptation of 0, process of 0, 2 gauging process lines in 3 centers of flux location of flywheel and travel calculation of grounds. Operation line sequence, platitude location setting, ground centers operations and travel. Platitude 45 angles, across angles, line condition setting, process and directions of location system, of center lines of the ground setting in sequence. Okay, DOS, configuration setting your void itself, and 7 line save location astral projection. Okay, so again, it's very important you understand sonograph interference, which is just black and white. Okay, once you understand the white, then you understand the black. Once you understand the black, then you understand the light, and then the shadows. Okay? Understand the perspective, you see the length and the width and the mass and the volume, right? How you see the travels of communication. Okay? How you see the travels of set location, just through black and white, guys. Okay? There's your longitude, there's your latitude, you're streaming into your eyes. Okay? But you are in center. You stay inside the system. Okay, you do not go outside the system of the eye. You're not ready. You go in the center, 12 and 24. Once you reach 24, then you come out. Okay, but you have to stand in center operation, stay inside the eye line. Okay, travel. So you can understand the structures and what you're creating a modification. Okay, so I'm just trying to get you the basic understanding how you come into that ground lines of setting, ground lines of travel, ground lines of sequence. So it's very powerful. When we get a little more complicated, how we see our face facades in direction of time frame and schematics over screen into line position nano settings of quantum cube. That's a lot of information structure, direct locations. This is your test on Friday, okay? We'll go into more on that in line position. So you understand how to not just live inside the eyes, but the eyes itself. Inside, outside, inside your eye. Okay, because everything happens in the directory. Okay, there's your longitude and latitude. More bandwidth, then you come in position of travel. Okay, and then you come in positions of travel. Okay, then you come in positions of travel. Okay, but it's all inside the eye, happening all the time. Okay, so it doesn't matter what you do. You can't make mistakes because you're already created through an anomaly. Inside lines of travel to its solar sail. Here's the sail. You're inside the system in projection. Holding the whole sail, monitoring your settings all through 3 windows of travel of communication. Right. Understand the story frame is line direct centers and location setting all through flux of travel communications. Converting line centers, operation lines of sequence, platted location setting into configuration of face recognition. Okay, face recognition, there's the face. So you're always going to have a face in center, and you're always going to have position you in the center, which is your astral projection that changes the platforms of setting. Okay, that changed the dimensional lines of solar sail in setting. Okay, you're ready in line direction. There's your solar sail. Okay, and position of operation. Okay, all inside the eye. All right, travels all together. Okay, so once we understand the lights, shades, and shadows, then we can come into different colors now. Okay, but you have to stand your 12 platforms of black and white. Okay, and that position lines of travel. Okay, then you have to stand your clock-ins at 24, 24 left, 24 right, and 24 center. Okay, that's where it starts for the clocking. Then you get to position your beddings, okay, over 4 sequence and set lines of travel. Okay, setting operation line ground centers location setting converts the system of travel calculation lines into its light bulb into its watts of design of travel communication. Inside line condition setting, process line position of 3 centers of travel, 4 centers of measure, 3 centers of scale of communication. Okay, then you go with the online sequence and platforms of EQ and rotation lines of setting. Your platted operation lines of grounds crosses angles on 45 angles in travel communication setting through its operation sequence. Platted locations of travel. Sets calculation line ground centers, location grid. Override the signals location of travel calculation. Inside calculation lines, there's your pyramid and set lines of travel. All right. All right, so we cross the angles, the 4 centers, 3 over travel. Just 3 in set calculations. So knowing exactly how to come into the bandwidth of your eye lines and line rotation surface and travel. Okay. So once we get into that platform, then we go in position of structural line, inner commodities, location information panel, the structure of the building. What's on top of the building, process everything outside the inside. Now graphing screens, it gets really interesting when you come to the location line grounds. Graphing line centers, sending the grid lines and location to outline signals, which is graphing location system of center operation. Okay, so that's outside looking in. Now I can bring my observer. Okay, I can bring my observer now and bring in everything into the game through astral projection. Okay, that's outside. Okay, which I'm in lines of translucent, right, in the void. Or I can change myself to black. Okay, but you always need an observer. Okay, but you have to create a fence. All right, now you can bring in the game. So nothing can penetrate the walls, or nothing can suck you into the galaxy, the other lines of alignment, location, and converting location operation line signals. Now converting lines, bring in data, okay, your OS, your IPA, your iOS, and your position navigation system, right, your docile. Processing positions, bring in the game. There's your projections. There's the platforms of you and astral projection. Okay, that's how it works. All right, and then you want to change the color, change it to red, security. All right, press that position of 12-9 wires, directing ground sensitive sequence locations, right? Which is you bring in another intelligence location, which is lines of blue outside, red inside. So that's converting line ground centers, outside signal. So we outside line rotation, inside calculations of red. Doing the same angle point line graph and structures of schematics over screen. Okay, like that instruction. Okay, so you got 2 converting lines projections running a sequence all at once in set position. Okay, so it's really interesting how you see that in all different platforms of travel. Okay, all right, so once we have that, then we can understand our platforms. Okay, it gets a little bit more confusing. We're just going to lace the lines, change the font screens. Okay, I'm going to just timeline centers and rotation, 3 centers of calculation, right? Which means they get a lot more faster because you're coming in consolidated area, being thinner. It's 3 centers and your schematics of travel. Just 3 lines of set overline centers, process lines of 3 centers, 4 centers of calculation of grounds. Okay, see how it travels really, really fast, right? The thinner it gets, okay, the more lucid it gets in travel. The more calculation grounds, the more smoother transition of travel calculation. Okay, working within the system and settings, your satellites, your modems, and your towers. But it changes from the time frame. Now, I can bring in a little bit more of the void, and now you can see the towers of communication. This is perspective, how you see the truth. Okay, instant lines of operation. Okay? So I've just shown you how this all works inside your travel. Okay? And then you can bring the car in this setting of angle. There's the car right there, traveling in position. Okay. So it's pretty incredible how you see that in position all through viewing, right? So once you understand that, you have to understand your eye division of your longitude of where you are in settings of operation. Okay, that's where you are. You can't go anything beyond that until you understand all this inside your system. Okay? Inside, outside of the Earth. Okay? Not the outer structure of space. Okay, so once we get into that, then it gets a lot more complicated. Now we can go back to the thin tone that processes outside signals and location lines of grounds, setting up a portal and lines of rotations, going through a tunnel line and operation lines of sequence, and location as travel. Okay, inside rotation, circulating and rotation of same angles and process calculation. Set an override signals and location system, triangulate the position line of its programming, directing line and operation line connection setting, process it, position its eye lines of sequence and calculation of travel. Okay, so there's a lot of things you can do in your systems all through process and directions. Okay? All right. All right, so it's really interesting when you add time frames to this. Okay, now I'm adding film strips of design lines where the body's going to be in central line communication of center. Right, graphing centers, 40 lights, 42 line screen locations, setting position operations and travel. 45 angles in the opposite direct location, setting up platforms into location grid. Okay? And then I line signal locations, change the ground center to sequence, and ceiling lines rotation center to center. So calculation modifies all time frame in lines of location setting to its position of its Skynet and travel into 45 split lines of anomaly of the simulation. So that's a lot of activity going in that position. So every time I put up a fence, now I can bring the observer watching everything, then I can bring in the game, the programs, right? So that's basically how it's set up. Okay, how you go through astral projection and programming. Okay, so that basically gets you in position, location, what goes on inside the eye. Now you can bring in lines more of a void, okay, but you got to be careful how you cross the angles of examination lines to maximize. Position lines of travel, set operation of center, Fibonacci over line rotation, and service and travel. Okay, so there's a lot of things you can do in set lines of operation, all through calculation and ground setting and sequence. Your platitude operation line grounds processes you're in position of flux line and travel calculation modification ground center location. Swirls in position, tunnels set in defense, operation setting, all through set position. Your planetary set location of Saturn. Your Saturn. 3 centers of 4 centers of travel, earth line rotations, and travel communication and setting and calculation. So I'm just showing you how you outline your signals in line communication setting, bring in coloration lines. Now I'm bringing in Pluto. Okay, in red line, operation lines, outer ring, and location. Okay, and then I'm bringing in positional holes, bringing in Mercury over cross line, angle, and the other line outline strip location of travel. Then I'm processing position, changing time frame, and line conditions of time flux over travel communication. Directing ground centers on sequence line condition of plasma line and opposite location of travel, in position Neptune and travel calculations. There's my solar system. Okay, inside the eye. So all this is all inside the eye in flux, time flux, correlations flux, operationalized sequence. So your truth narrative is the ground centers. Your false narrative is the space centers of your Earth. Okay? So you just have to truly understand how to see the solar system and structure of design line, operation sequence, and platform. Okay? Booyah. See? It's a constant continuous flow of constantly changing metric meters of scales of your film strip that you're changing all lines of your film strip and design through a TV receptor or reception. You got to see your eyes as nothing but a TV prompter of a film strip of design. Okay? But it's amazing how you forward it to your lights all through the eye lines of setting of travel. Okay? Your solar system. Right? And that's how you see it from the outline. You're bringing it outside. Okay? It's on standby. All right, so you bring in the connections of your planetary system outside the line rotation. Now it's outside the eye. It's outside now. Now it's going to surface in a direct line connection. Travels outside your system in 3 centers of travel. Okay? So now it's here outside your system in your universe in travel. Okay? And here you are bringing another astral projection of yourself, which is another observer, processing what's going on through the system, inside position. You right here in observation. Okay, that's you in observation. Okay, you looking outside in real time, seeing your solar system, what you brought out through the eye division. Okay, so that's out of screen, out of time, out of frame. Okay, and it rotates its own system, right? Travel. Okay, so it's amazing how this all works in platforms of 24 inside calculation. All right, guys. It's a lot to take in, eh? All through structure and design. So all you guys are doing is this. All you guys are doing is this. Taking the box, taking the singularity line grounds outside the box. That's all you guys are doing. That's all you're doing. But you have a certain bandwidth that you do not cross, okay? Until you understand the outer structure of your system, which is outer space. Okay, which is higher levels of acceleration of time frame. So work with the inside, and then you work with the outside line rotation. Okay, and then you platitude divisions, you bring your outline center locations. Now you bring it outside the eye line at a 45 angle. When you bring it out through an angle line rotations, it correlates this in the calculation system. Now it's in outer space. Okay, and you bring your astral projections, but again, you have to set electrical grid so you don't get sucked in the eye itself. All right, okay, crossing angles, do a graph screen. Graph screens are more powerful in positions of operation itself. Okay, now you can bring the outer structure of you again, which is the observer, seen from outside, bring it in the game that you see from inside. All right, so again, there it is. You're looking at your planet system in real time. Okay, that's how it works. All right, so that's going to help you identify yourself. Okay, so just trying to get you the basics. You get in position of black and white. You know exactly how to go through graphs and set lines of operations adding to SIN. Okay, all that activity is happening all at once. All right, so that's your test on Friday. Okay. I want to say the 3 conversion setting attraction and the 4 lines of measure. Setting position here, setting positions here, and setting positions here in 3 angles. Start with that position, all right? But stay within the center operation, okay? Work with inside and then travel through the metric meters outside of your bridging, okay? Set position here, attractions, okay? Start with that. Only that, all right? So, getting in that positions, then you come into your location grid. See, there it is. There's your location grid. Okay, so you guys are there. So you are looking at your building from inside and outside of its travel. Through hydraulics, through an elevator, through an escalator. But if you're really, really close, you can see yourself at face recognition. Okay, there you go. Face recognition. All right, so let's start there. Then you can get to grounds, and then you get your set position of operation. Okay? Starting with that position, inside and outside rotation, inside travel. Okay? That's what I want to see. Know exactly how to stay with inside the system, seeing from inside and outside at the same time through face recognition. Okay? Now once you understand that, then you can outside the grounds, that outside structure, totally different operation system through construct. So what you guys are creating coming into that position is all of the creation that you already are, but coming into the creating itself is also the position of what you always are in that position, what you are in positions of. Understanding the inside is understanding the outside of projection. Understanding the outside, okay, outside projection is understanding the in structure of location. Okay, so it's just basic understanding through a box frame. Okay, and it doesn't matter how you look at it because everything is always inside the eye itself. Okay, so you can't make mistakes because it's already done through creation of creating. Okay, guys? That's it. Right, we'll stop there because there's a lot to go on here. And once you process that, you come in your own face recognition. Okay, protecting everything you're saying. Okay, gamma signatures of face recognition. Okay. All right. You have any questions? Let me know. I'll be on live. Adios.